Alright guys, welcome back to Twin Dragons Review. Today we're doing an overlook at MEGALO BOX Season 2. This will be major spoiler free, some small spoilers. We wanted to do a video on this series since it went under a lot of people's radars just like the first season. The show deserves to have a big audience because it's just that good. I think it could appeal to even someone that isn't the biggest fan of sports anime. It has a deep story and is a really good character development. So MEGALO BOX is definitely a lot more on the seinen side of things as it deals with a lot of dark themes like the mafia, drugs, fighting, and murder. If you haven't seen any of MEGALO BOX, I highly recommend that you check it out and just see just how good it really is.
So all I gotta say is this is one of the best animes I've seen recently. It was definitely a sleeper since the first season didn't get much traction either. I was initially worried about the fact that Season 2 got announced as it ended perfectly, unlike some of my other favorite series. Season 2 is also known as Nomad, and MEGALO BOX 2 follows Joe a couple years after Season 1, suffering from a pill addiction, depression, and having hallucinations. The tone is much darker, but it fits with the theme Nomad, as Joe's taken fights from anywhere and wasn't settled down as we would have thought after his fight with Yuri. We follow Joe's journey through his lowest of lows and see him bounce back from it. So overall, this was actually really good. You could argue that it surpassed the first season. I'd recommend this one to my friend who's doing the channel with me as he's a big fan of combat sports. Personally, I didn't really get into combat sports until early this year, but I'm a sucker for sports animes and manga since the story's unexpectedly good and has some of the best characters. For example, Kagami from Kuroko's Basketball and Sakuragi from Slam Dunk are both one of my favorite shonen characters. It's interesting how a manga/anime about sports executes storylines and characters more effectively than some of the big series we know. If you ever get into chance, I highly recommend Kuroko and Slam Dunk if you're a basketball fan and looking for something with a good story with a strong cast of characters. MEGALO BOX was also based on another manga called Ashita no Joe, which came out in the 60s. The anime was supposed to be a 50th anniversary celebration for one of the most influential series at the time. I haven't gotten a chance to read it, but I know Ashita no Joe has also inspired the works of Hajime no Ippo, one of the greatest shonen. My friend here will talk a bit more about it as he's watched a good bit of Hajime no Ippo.
So if you have seen MEGALO BOX or you ended up watching it after our video and really liked it, I would recommend Hajime no Ippo. It's definitely not dark like MEGALO BOX and focuses a lot more on the sports aspect as its main focus, and it has a lot of comedy in it too. I haven't seen all of it, maybe 50 to 75 episodes. I'm not sure why I never finished the anime and moved on to trying to read the manga, but I plan to soon, especially since it recently hit 1,300 chapters. It's an even bigger grind than when me and my friend, that's the other half of the channel, caught up to One Piece. From what I've seen, if you are into combat sports or just sports manga in general, I would give the series a chance. It's a lot better than I was expecting when I first started it.
So I also want to talk about how well they handled some of the themes, especially with someone after retiring, developing an addiction, going into depression, and basically what happens after they fall off. It's a realistic interpretation as we hear about with most professional athletes after retirement. Seeing Joe struggle and being at his lowest was a big moment with his character arc, and I didn't expect to see, but it made the show feel more realistic in a sense. His relationship with Sachio started off not too well, however, as the season went on, it was nice to see them rebuild their once broken relationship.
In this season, we see how Joe's life choices affected his relationship with all the kids that used to stay with him and Pops. Most of them didn't even want to talk to him, but a couple were really excited to see him. Not at first, because they were still hurt by him leaving and didn't want to show that they were happy. Bonjiri is an example of this, but we are trying to keep this video relatively spoiler-free, so I don't want to go too much into the characters.
And apart from Joe's development, another thing I thought they did better than the first season was the tone and the soundtrack. First season was more action heavy as the big focus on it were the fights and progressing through the tournament, while dabbling into why Joe is fighting and why Yuri is excited to meet him again since the first episode with the two of them on the bridge. Season 2 is a lot different as the main focus on it is Joe's redemption, fixing his mistakes, and making it back to the top like he was during the end of last season. The soundtrack surprised me a lot, mainly because of how good it was. The soundtrack was a good mix of Spanish guitar and fast beats, and it was something I didn't expect that would work, but it ended up working really well. I highly recommend to anyone watching to check out the soundtrack on YouTube. Another thing I enjoyed was the animation, as it stayed crisp throughout the whole season and didn't really notice the dip. Well, that's all we have for now, as a couple weeks has given us big news mainly regarding the JJK movie and a one-shot from Bleach coming in Jump's next issue, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.